I think we reached here, so let me just finish chapter 2 and then I'm going to start the new chapter. Okay, so for example, let me just draw this drawing. So what he is telling you here is the following. Let's say you have a database, which simply means a collection of tables in our case. So this is my database and it contains 4 tables. طبعا in a disk you can have many databases. I can have another database here which contains only 2 tables. So there can be many databases يعني. Okay, so in one disk we can have many databases, but let's assume that يعني, let's just concentrate on one database now. And I have a DBMS. Database management system that I'm going to buy from Jareer. And I'm going to try to program using Java, inshallah, at the end of the semester for my application, for my project, which I'm going to discuss probably next week. Java application, or let me put it up. It can be Java, it can be Python, it can be whatever you like. Let me just put it application, up, and so on. So the application will talk to the DBMS, and the DBMS will talk back to him, and the DBMS will do whatever I want it to do with my database. And maybe I am here with my computer. This is a client machine, let me call it CM. It can be mobile, it can be whatever it is, and this is you. So you will use your machine, of course, and your machine will talk to the application program. And this one. I think by now you are familiar with this. Am I right, Shabab? I think you are familiar, hopefully, by this architecture.
Yes.
Yes, very good. Now the question is the following. Now here I am saying this. Classification of DBMS. What do I mean by classification of DBMS? Do we have different classifications for DBMS for this one? Do we have different classification? What he means is the following. If I go to Jareer, so I told you, okay, I'm going to give you this project. So at the end of the semester, I want you to do this one for me. So go and buy a DBMS. So when you go to Jareer to buy a DBMS, what are you going to ask him, Shabab? You will ask him, okay, can you give me a DBMS? So he will ask you a lot of questions before he gives you the DBMS. He will ask you the following questions. He will tell you, okay, what kind of DBMS do you want? Do you want a relational DBMS? Do you want object-oriented DBMS? Do you want a hierarchy DBMS? Do you want, so what is the data model that you want? Simply what he's saying is, okay, when you create your database here, are you going to represent them as tables, or are you going to represent them as trees or as networks? So what is the data model? Okay, what do you want? So he will ask you that question in Jareer, يعني, they will ask you that question. Then you will tell him, okay, I want to represent them as tables. Oh, in that case, you are looking for relational DBMS. Then he will ask you, how many users do you think you will have? How many users will be used by the system after it is developed? يعني? Is it going to be single user or is it going to be multi-user? If it's a single user, he will tell you, okay, take access. If it's a multi-user, he will tell you, okay, now you take maybe my SQL server will be good for you and so on. يعني. Now he will ask you, are you going to have a centralized DBMS or are you going to have a distributed DBMS? Are you going to have open source? Do you like open source DBMS or do you want a different type of licensing? What about types of paths? Do you want someone DBMS which will make a B+3 for you, or you don't want B+3 for you? Yani? Or he will ask you, do you want a general purpose DBMS which can do anything for you? You can create any database you want, or you want specific DBMS? Yani? So they have different classification of DBMS. So you have to know what you want to buy before you go to Jareer. Are you with me, Shabab? In our case, we will use a relational data model because we are going to represent our database as what? As tables. So our database will be a number of tables. So this is called the relational model. And after that one, we will ask you the number of users. We are going to have many users. So your project is going to be used by many users. So you will tell him, give me relational for many users. It's going to be number of sites. Are they going to be from different places? Are they going to log into your system? Yes, you tell him, yes, I want from different places. But don't worry about this one. It's a little bit complicated. But yes, we'll have many users. It's multi-user. Yani. What about the cost? Do you want open or different? It depends. Yani. When you're a company, this is important for you. For us, it doesn't matter. Okay. Am I going to have, are you going to have a B+3 and hash all different kinds of accesses? Tell him, yes, I want that. Do you want general purpose or special purpose? Oh, tell him I want general purpose. So he will choose general purpose, which contains all whatever you want from these different classifications. And he will tell you, okay, I think you need MySQL. So get MySQL and so on. So this is what we call by classification of DBMS. By the way, in our project, most of you will use MySQL. And if you want to use a different DBMS, that's fine. Okay, just tell me why do you want to do that. And if I agree with you, you can use that DBMS.
So, Doctor.
Yes.
If I have that I want to sort the data as a relational model.
Yes.
And after that, I have another project. I would like to sort them as a hierarchical or object-oriented.
So you have to have two different.
You have to buy another copy of DBMS or what?
Definitely, you will have to buy a different DBMS in that case. Yeah. So it's very. In fact, in companies they have many DBMSs. Yeah, they don't, because one DBMS cannot satisfy them, so they buy 2 or 3 different kinds of DBMSs.
Number of sites. If I want it as a distributed, is it talking about number of tires or?
No, yeah. In this case, what he's talking about is: are you going to put one centralized place, or are you going to have your DBMS distributed in many places? So the same. Okay, there are some DBMSs. They will just, they will ask you to put the data in building 14, everything in one place.
Yes.
Or I can have the data in Riyadh, in Jeddah, and so on. So there are some DBMS they can handle that also.
So it's not about number of tires and.
No. In this case, it's going to be either distributed database or centralized database. In this case, he's not talking about the number of. He's talking about number of sites. In how many sites are you going to put your data? Is the data going to be only in one place, or is it going to be in different places?
The main reason I think it's about backup, right? If I want it distributed.
That's one reason. Another reason also is the network communication. For example, Bank Riyadh, they have customers in Jeddah, they have customers in Riyadh, they have customers in Dammam. So they don't want to put all the database in one machine. In Riyadh, it will be too much communication problems. Network هيكون flooded. So what they do is, for those people who are living in Jeddah, they will make a server in Jeddah for them, for example. So they will make the DBMS, which is in Jeddah, will work for them. So the DBMS can handle the distributed sites. Are you with me? So it's the same DBMS, but it can handle the machines, the disks, which are what? This is what it means. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me put it this way for you. So what it means is the same DBMS, it will have different disks. So this disk, which will also take care of it, another disk which will also take care of it, but this disk can be in Dammam, this disk can be in Jeddah, and this disk can be in Riyadh.
And so all of them have the same table, right?
They have the same table, the same information. So the same information. What they do is maybe they will take some part of this table and they will keep it here. These are the Jeddah people, so they will keep the records for the Jeddah people here, the records for the Dammam people here, the records for the Riyadh people here. So they don't have to go each time to Riyadh and get the information through the network and so on. So that's why. For example, when I take in my money, I'm in Dammam, so they will put my record in Dammam. They don't have to put it. But when I move to Riyadh, then they will I am now accessing the ATM machines which are in Riyadh. Maybe they will move my data from Riyadh from Dammam to what? To the Riyadh one. So the DBMS automatically will do that one. So this way he will minimize the traffic. So if you are handling this kind of a database, having in many sites, your data is in many sites, not in one site, هذا نسميها ايش؟ نسميها multi-site database like this one. Many number of sites. If it's only one site, هنسميها centralized site, one site. Or it's a distributed site, معناتها you are having it in different places. It's more than that, but I'll just stop here for now. Okay, sure. So assume your data is only located in one place. Okay. For our course. Okay. Because distributed database is totally different course. You have to take another separate course some more distributed database. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other question, Shabab? Okay, so simply means before you go to Jareer, know all the answers that they are going to ask you. They will tell you, do you want this, or do you want this, or do you want this, or do you want this? What type do you want? So you have to answer all these questions. Then they will suggest, okay, please use this kind of use this DBMS. So there are many relational DBMS, Shabab. There are many relational DBMS. Oracle is a relational DBMS. MySQL is a relational DBMS. Access is a relational DBMS. Ingress, DB2, many of them. Do you understand? But some are better than the other. For example, Access might not be B+3 for you. And maybe B+3 is very important for you because it will make it very fast. And so on. So when you are going to work for a big company, to know this information, at least you have to be a DBA. Yani. As a developer, you might not even know this. Exactly what kind of a database do you want. Yani. So once you are a DBA, you will be in a position to answer all these questions. You will know exactly what kind of a DBMS you want. Because as a DBA, you know the internals of DBMS better than the developers. Any question? Okay, so we are done with chapter 2. What did we cover in chapter 2? Mainly terminology, mustalahat. But the only thing that we discussed was in detail, it was a little bit about what? About DBMS. We تكلمنا عن DBMS, what is the advantage of a DBMS, what are the different classifications of a DBMS, and so on. We also talked about tier, يعني 3-tier architecture, and 4-tier architecture, 2-tier architecture, and centralized architecture, and so on. يعني. And we talked about what the data model is, and what are the number of sites I just explained for you briefly. يعني. And تقريبا that's what we did. يعني. So in fact, if you deeply look at chapter 2 is full of terminologies, data model, 2-tier, 3-tier, and so on. يعني. So that's what I discussed in chapter 2. So we didn't talk about database design at all in chapter 2. Any question before I move to chapter 3? Okay, before I move to chapter 3, I like to talk about the quiz. You will have a quiz for chapter 1 and chapter 2. I just finished chapter 2 today. And it will be on Thursday, inshallah. Khalas, now you don't have any excuse that you don't know anything about chapter 2. Chapter 2 is completely finished. So your quiz will be chapter 1 and chapter 2, and Thursday it will be your quiz. Now your quiz will be most probably multiple choice question, and it will going to be using Blackboard. So for the first maybe 20 minutes, we will conduct with our normal lecture. After that one, we will move from MS Teams into Blackboard, and you have to do your what they call your quiz for Blackboard. Inshallah, I'll talk about it on Thursday. Don't worry.
Thursday or Saturday?
No, Thursday, الخميس. After 2 days.
يا أستاذ كيف نذاكر للكويز؟
Maybe I will give you a sample يعني. Okay, I will post a sample for you عشان يساعدكم يعني. Even though this time the quiz will be different, it will be like a multiple choice question يعني. Maybe I will give you the definition of a data model, and I will tell you A, is this data model? B, is this schema? C. So you have to answer. So you match the definition with it.
Study the PowerPoint?
Yeah, as the PowerPoint. I don't think. Do you have the book with you?
لا ما أخذنا كتب.
Yeah, I think so. Most of the time it's going to be what I said in class and the PowerPoint. يعني. You don't have any other thing. What can we do? Okay.
Doctor.
Yes.
How many questions and what's the duration of the quiz?
This is going to be like 20 minutes. It's going to be like 10 questions, multiple choice questions. So
yeah.
So 2 minutes per question, يعني.
And all of it multiple choice.
Yeah, it will be multiple choice. It will be easier for you. It is online because writing explanation, when you are not with me, it's difficult to control. But multiple choice, what I do is you have to solve question number 1 before you go to question number 2. You cannot go back to question number 1 again.
So I can't go back to the question.
No, you cannot go back. You have to answer it and go forward. It's only one way. There is no going back. So this will minimize the communication and what they call it. Another thing is the questions are going to be scrambled. So I have a pool of questions, let's say 30 or 40 questions. So each student will get randomly 10 questions. So what you get will be different from what your other person will get. At the same time, even if you get the same question, then the A, the B, the C, the D are not in the same order. Automatically, the system will do that for me. Do you understand? So I just give him 40 questions, and I'll tell him, okay, now scramble the questions. So give any student 10 questions. So he will randomly pick 10 questions for every student. So you will get 10 questions, and the other person will get different questions probably. But even if you say, if you are, somehow, if you get the same number of the same questions, let's say same 10 questions, but they will be in different order, and the multiple choice will be in different order. So the Blackboard can do that for me. So I prefer having multiple choice. It will minimize communication, and automatically you will get your result. How much you scored, automatically you will get it. And it will also give you the correct answers. Which one is the correct answer also you will be given to.
How many quizzes will you have?
I will have, I don't know, I'm going to prepare them today, the whole day. I think probably I'm thinking a minimum 30 questions. And then they will be scrambled.
I mean the quizzes. How many quizzes we will have?
I think there are 5 quizzes, and I will take the best 4. It is in the syllabus. Okay, I said I will give you 5 quizzes, and we will take the best 4.
Okay, thanks.
My pleasure. Any other question? Okay, thank you very much. I know chapter 1 and chapter 2 are very boring, a lot of reading, a lot of terminology and so on, but we have to do that one. Before we start the design and so on, we have to go through some boring chapters. So hopefully this is the end of it. So let's go now to talking about this now. Now, what I'm going to do today is the following. I'm going to talk about relational model. So relational model, what does relational model simply mean? Do you see my screen, Shabab? Do you see my mouse moving?
Yes, we see it.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, in this course, we are going to use relational model. So we are not going to use, for example, hierarchy model or tree model. Tree model معناتها your data will be like a tree. Do you understand what I'm saying, Shabab? So we are not going to use this model at all. We are going to use this model, relational model. Now, this chapter 3, he talks about relational model. So I'm going to talk about relational model a lot in this chapter. So it's purely about relational model. Once we understand the relational model, then after that one, we are going to go and create our databases, inshallah, after that one. I will show you how to create tables. Relational model simply means tables, okay? A relation is just like a table. They call this one a relation, or they call it what? A table. Relation. Or also you can call it what? You can call it also a table. It has a lot of names. Okay? Or you can call it also entity type. These are all names for the same thing. Entity type. We'll talk about this one later on, inshallah. Entity type. We'll talk about everything. But there is time in which you can call it entity. There is time in which you can call it relation. There is also time in which you can call it table, even though they are nearly the same, but we use them at different times. Okay? So today I'm going to talk about not table, not entity, even though they are the same, but I'm going to talk about only what? Relation. And then I'll talk to you what is the difference between a relation and a table. Is this point clear, Shabab? Is this point clear, hopefully?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, very good. So let's start now with relations, with tables in short. But I will call them relations. I'm not going to call them tables, and you will understand what is the difference. So, the relational model and the relational constraints. Constraints معناتها ايش? Simply, once I create the tables, or when I am creating the tables, I have to put some constraints on the tables. Constraint معناتها محظورات, okay? So whenever I am going to create a table, I am going to put some constraints. Let me show you an example of how to create a table using, طبعا we are not going to use Excel, خلاص Excel مع السلامة انتهى. بعد كده we are going to create tables using the DBMS. So we have to write some SQL, which I will teach you inshallah next week. Probably we'll start the SQL. So using SQL, I'm going to create a table, another table, another table, another table. Let me show you SQL of how to create a table, just to give you a glimpse of SQL. This is SQL. So I'm going to create a table called employee, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, sir. Can you see? Can you see? You cannot?
Now we see.
Now you see. So I think I was very fast, Manish. Yeah. So this is create table employee. So this is going to be one table. This is another table, create table department. This is table number 2. Create table department location. This is table number 3. So I'm showing you how to create 3 tables using SQL here. Now look, what are the columns of the tables? The columns are first name, middle initials, last name, SSN, birthday, and so on and so on. معناته after this table will be, it will look like this one. It will have first name هنا. What is the column يا شباب? Middle initials, MINT. Middle initials, just assume that. And the third name, and so all the, I think it has 10 columns, the table Hadi. It has 10 columns. These are the 10 columns. First name, middle initials, last name, SSN, birthday, and so on. There are 10 of them. Are you with me, Shabab? Now, what is first name? First name is up to 15 characters. So this is a string of 15. So a name is a string of up to 15 characters. So don't put 16 characters. So what I'm saying is, later on, when you are going to put, for example, first name is Salahuddin. How many characters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 characters. That's okay. It's not more than 15. So he will accept up to what? Up to 15 characters. Ali is only 3 characters. No problem. Sami is 4 characters. No problem. But don't exceed what? Don't exceed how many? Don't exceed 15 characters. So this is a constraint.
Doctor.
Yes.
Isn't this a bad design? Like putting a constraint upon a name? Because there is long names.
Oh yeah, in that case, this is a constraint. You have to live with that. Otherwise, يعني, it will. This is how the database. This is how the DBMS is. So this constraint automatically, once you say it's 15, it's automatically the DBMS will never forget. So it will not allow you. So here it's a weakness. It's a limitation. But it is imposed by who? By the DBMS. Now, why do they do that one? They do that one for performance reasons. So they have another reason why they did it. So they are making a constraint, but the reason for this constraint is because for performance. Okay. So when we talk about query optimization, maybe if I have time, I will mention that one, inshallah. But yes, it is a weakness. They are putting some constraint. So قاعد يحددوك. What about later on if I get a person whose name is very long, 19 or 20 characters? What can I do? Then you can change the size. You are allowed to change the size. And using SQL, you will be allowed to change the size, no problem. Let's say now in KFPM, no one is in KFPM, his first name more than 20 characters. I checked all the names, they are all less than 20. Then I will say varchar 20. Now, what about next year we accept somebody in orientation, his name is 24 or 25 characters, what do we do? Then we can change the column size, no problem. It's very easy to change it. So it will not affect the values. Okay, does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, very good. So this is a constraint.
Doctor.
Why? Yes, sir.
Some constraints are not clear. So what if I have 3 employees have the same first name and last name, only they have differences in the grandfather, not the father?
Very good. We can have the same thing in the university. That's why we use IDs. That's why when you came to the university, we gave you what? A student ID. So names can be duplicated, no problem. Sahih?
But I think you have mentioned that we shouldn't, the bad design of the database if they have the same first name or.
Yeah, so the first name is allowed in the university, for example, database. So the problem is, but I'm not going to allow for example, let's take this one here. Let's take this XML. Do you see my Excel sheet? Sorry, Excel sheet. Do you see this?
Yes.
So, for example, I can have many Alis here. For example, Ali, I can have many of them with the same name, with the same last name. Also, I can have duplicates. It's possible. But to avoid that one, I'm not going to make this column unique. I'm not going to put that constraint for column header. So uniqueness is not allowed. Duplication is allowed. So ما في constraint uniqueness هنا. I'm not going to do a unique constraint in the column هذا. لأنه علي I can have many duplicates. But what I will do is I am going to create another column here, سميه student ID مثلا, ID. Here duplicates will never be allowed.
So they will be noticed by the ID and distinguished by the ID number, not the binary.
Definitely. Exactly. الحين مثلا انت لو اتصلت مثلا بالريجسترار and you give him your first name and your last name, he will say I have 5 students in the university with the first name, last name. Give me your ID. فهمت علي? So he will never.
واضح اقول يا دكتور.
Sorry.
اقول واضح clear.
Exactly. Yes. Very good. So this is what I am saying الحين. So when you create the table, don't put حاجة اسمها unique هنا. So let me finish the constraint. So here you will be constrained up to 15 characters for first name. Don't write more than 15 characters. If you want to put right, you have to change the constraint. You have to choose. First of all, go and change the 15 to 20. Then you can put the name. Otherwise, the DBMS مش هيسمح لك تدخل النيم. Now another thing, not null. Not null معناته ايش؟ I'm not going to allow here. For example, I don't know what your name is. I know your ID is 5, but I don't know what your name is. So I cannot leave it null. I must put something here. So not null معناته ايش؟ In this column, I should not see something which is null value. Null هنا ونال هنا ونال هنا مش مسموح. Do you understand? So this column cannot be nullable. معناته null values are not ايش؟ allowed. So look, so what I'm saying here, okay, in the employee table, the first name, it is up to 15 characters, but you cannot make it null. So I must have the information. I must have the first name of that person. It must be in my database. What about middle initials? It's only 1 character. It can also be what? It can also be null. I don't care about it. You can make it null. So what he is telling me is simply here, for the middle initials here, sometimes I can leave it null. Sometimes I can put, let's say, A is my initial, like say Adam, maybe B is your initial here. Ali, maybe C is your initial. But for this Ali, we can leave it null. No problem. It's okay. Allowed in your database. So it's giving you flexibility. For example, birth date. It has to be a date and it can be null. If I don't know your birthday, that's fine. I can allow that. مسموح لي في الجامعة إنه maybe it's not date is not that important to have. It's good to have, but it's not that important. And so on. Did you get my point, Shabab? But don't worry, we'll talk about this one here. But I want to show you one constraint here. So these are constraints. These are all constraints. This is a constraint. This is also another constraint. So when I'm going to create a table, I'm going to create many constraints. Can I do a constraint field هنا يا شباب في Excel? Can I make this column unique so that if I put by mistake another 5 here, Excel ما هيقبلها? It will say no. Can I do that for Excel?
I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe it's not possible to do it in Excel. What about, can I say don't leave null in Excel? Can I force so that this cannot be null? Can I do that? For example, هنا null مش مسموح في first name. If I leave this one as null, will Excel, can I make something for Excel so that it will not accept anything which is null row? الرو اللي في عنده null في الكولوم هذا في السيل هذا. I'm not sure if we can do that or not. Yeah, I'm not sure. But in this is in SQL, it is very simple. Just do this. Automatically, Mr. DBMS, he will create the table for you and he will never forget the constraints. Later on, if you are going to insert a value, let's say if you are going to insert a row in the table, عايز داخل الرو هذا ده عايز تعمل insert في الرو هذا, it will check all the constraints. هتشوف هذا البرايمري key it is duplicate, هل هذا عندك null فيه؟ كل ال constraints it will check them. If you are fine, if no constraint is violated, then he will what? He will put it into the system, into the row. So who's going to do that one? It's going to be done by who? By Mr. What? By Mr. DBMS. Because when you created the table, you are telling the DBMS, Mr. DBMS, the first name is only 15 characters. Middle initials is 1 character. Last name is 15 characters. So all that information is kept by the DBMS. Then when you insert a new student or a new employee, when you give him the complete row of that new employee, he will check all the fields of that row. And if any one of them is violating, he will tell you, no, I cannot insert this one because when he creates the table, you told me these are the constraints. So don't worry, we have different kinds of constraints. Now these constraints here, we call them data type constraints, but we don't call them data type constraints. We call them domain constraints. معايا ولا يا شباب؟ Can you see my mouse يا شباب?
We can see it, yes.
Yeah, these constraints are called domain constraints. This constraint is called not null constraints. So what about primary key constraint? SSN is primary key. معناته ايش الحين؟ My primary key here, it's not called SSID, it's called SSN. معناته social security number, and this is primary key. خلينا نخليه احمر هذا او اصفر هذا. اصفر معناته it's primary key in Excel, okay? But here in SQL, after I write all the columns, then SSN, which is this column here, SSN, شايف ال SSN هذا؟ SSN is what? Is my primary what? My primary key. معناته ايش؟ Duplicates will not be allowed في الكولوم SSN. معناته في الكولوم هذا duplicates will not be allowed. Also nulls will not be allowed. Nulls, there is no null in SSN دائما. In primary key. So this is your primary key. So this is how we write, this is how we show, this is my primary key in this table is SSN. What about the primary key here? The primary key here is D number. Here I have 4 columns, D number, D name, manager SSN, and the primary key is this one. So primary key is also a constraint. What kind of a constraint? 2 constraints. The first constraint معناته ايش؟ not null is not allowed in SSN. حتى المفروض ما يكتب هذا not null، ما يحتاج يكتب not null هنا. لأنه once he say it's primary key automatically it must be not null. So هذا like duplicate يعتبر هذا يعني it's not null. At the same time no duplicates are allowed. So these are what we call constraints. Are you with me يا شباب?
Yes.
The constraint. By
yes.
default, it is null or
which one? By default, it's not null. If you don't put any constraint هنا مثلا زي هذا,
yes,
automatically it's not null. So when I create the table, I say this is how I use SQL to create a table. هنا ما قلتها not null. هنا ما قلتها not null. هنا قلتها out of these 10 columns, only 1, 2, 3, 4 are not nullable, but the rest I can put null, no problem.
Doctor.
Yes.
Can I have more than primary key in one table?
Very good. You cannot have. You can only have one primary key. It's not allowed.
One primary key per table.
Per table at most. You can have no primary key. That's allowed. But if you are going to create a primary key, you can have only one primary key. But one primary key, it doesn't mean one column. One primary key can sometimes it can be 2 columns. For example,
2
here.
columns.
Yeah, I will tell you what I mean. شوف البرايمري key هذا, it contains only 1 column, صحيح? SSN, yes. Isn't it? But look at this one here. The primary key contains what? Department number and department ايش? Location. So this table called create table department locations. Both columns, they consist of one primary key. It's one primary key, but it contains a composite attributes, 2 attributes, 2 columns. But it's one primary key. So 2 primary key معناته ايش؟ او write primary key another primary key another primary key. هذا اللي ما مسموح لي. I can only write primary key only in one line, and then I specify what my primary keys are. It's going to be 1 column, it can be more than 1 column. I will talk about this one, don't worry. But I'm not allowed to write primary key again primary key. لا مش مسموح. So the primary key is only 1, but it can have 1 column, it can have 2 columns.
Should we have primary key in each table?
Not necessary. Now we only do primary key if we are going to refer to the table from another tables. تذكر الحين في البوك the library table اللي عملناها, in the book table and in the member table we created primary keys. Why did we create primary keys? Because in the borrowing table we said what? This book ID and this member ID. So I'm using the member ID and the book ID in another table. So that's why we create a primary key, just to make sure that يعني they are unique and they are not nullable يعني. So unless you are going to refer the table from another tables, no need to specify primary key. It's just optional يعني. But if you are going to refer, yes, you have to. And I will come to this one, don't worry. I will talk about this one inshallah later on. But all I want you to understand is now, before we go and run and create our tables الحين بالحماس, first of all, understand when you create a table, you have some constraints that you have to know about. Okay? It's very, very important that you need to put those constraints. Am I making sense to you, Shabab?
Yes.
Very good. So
Yes.
up to now, I was talking about what am I going to explain in chapter 3, in this chapter, sorry, chapter 5. I think this is chapter 5. I jumped to chapter 5, I think, in the book. So in this chapter, I'm going to talk about what are the different constraints that we need to create in a table. فحنتكلم عن constraints فقط في الشابتر هذا. خلاص after we know the constraints, the next thing I'm going to teach you SQL to create those tables using those constraints. يعني to create them in such a way. So when do I make things not null? When do I make things nullable? Which one shall I choose for my primary key? What is foreign key? هذا لسه ما شرحتوش. I will talk about it inshallah later on. So all these things I will explain for you inshallah in this chapter. So this chapter is purely about constraints and why they are important. This is what this chapter talks about. So do you understand why do we have this chapter, Shabab? It's a very, very important chapter. Before you go to create the table, you need to put a lot of constraints on the tables that are created. Yeah. So each table will have a number of columns. This table will have maybe 10 columns, maybe this will have 5 columns. So for each column, what are my constraints? So this column number 1, it have this constraint. Column number 2, it has this constraint. Column number 3, it has this constraint. So later on, when you are going to insert values into your tables, we check all the constraints. None of them is violated. Otherwise, the DBMS هيقول لك لا, I'm not going to insert this one because it is violating this constraint. Are you getting my point, Shabab? Why do we need this chapter? Is this clear for you?
Yes, clear.
Clear.
Very good. So let's go now to the chapter. Thank you very much. Yes. Let's go to the chapter and let's talk about the chapter now one by one. So this chapter talks about the relational model and the relational database constraints, which are the relational database constraints. So I'm going to talk about this one by one. So this is chapter 5 in your book. You need to read all the sections of the book. Okay, it's important. And once you get it, of course. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the relational data model. Then I'm going to talk about the relational database constraints اللي كلمتكم عنه, and the constraints and the schemas and what happens when you violate the constraint. So I'm going to talk about these are the main outline. This is the agenda of the chapter. Is this point clear, Shabab? Okay, so let's talk about the relational model. In a relational model, the data will be organized in relations, in tables. This is what it means. Okay, so this is a table, or also we call it a relation. في فرق بيناتهم بسيط جدا جدا. I'll talk about إيش هو الفرق. So now this is a table, or this is a relation, and a relation has columns and it has rows. Now the rows, we have another name for them. We also call them tuples. So this is the first tuple or the first row. This is the second tuple or the second row, the third tuple. So I have how many tuples here? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the first row is not a value. This is a column names. This is a part of the schema. So the first row is part of the schema. This is the values are starting from this one. So we call this one the first attribute, the second attribute, the third attribute, the fourth attribute, or the fifth attribute. So I have 5, tuple. I have 5 tuples here. So this is a tuple. So row and tuple are the same. This is a column, another column, another column, another column, another column, another column, another column. But I don't call them columns. I call them what? Attributes. So هنا في لخبطة بين why do I need tuple at the same time why do I need row? Why don't I just call it a row وريح نفسي? Here, why do I call this one sometimes an attribute and sometimes what? A column. Why do I do that one? The reason is the following. The reason is the following. Okay. Let me use this one. The reason is the following. Now, when we talk about relation, when we talk about table, نستخدم لغتين مختلفتين. When I say relation, I use tuple. لو قلت لي هذه relation سميها tuple. أما when I say this is a table, then I will سميه a row. Okay, so whenever we say this is a relation, then we have to finish saying tuple. Don't say row anymore. خلاص. Even though they are the same يعني. Okay. And whenever we say whenever I say attributes, I'm talking about a relation now. I'm not talking about a table. Now in a table, I will call it a column. So column is equivalent to attribute. Row is equivalent to what? To a table, to a tuple, sorry, and a table is equivalent to a relation. Say. So, but is there a difference between a relation and a table? Yes, very small relation, a very small difference. Yani. Now this is the difference. Let me tell you. Look at this one here. Let me assume the following. Let me assume in this table, let me just put any values here. It doesn't matter. If you look at this table here, now, do I have, can I call this one a table? Can I call this one a relation? Yes. You can call it a table. Also, you can call it also a relation. In fact, any table is a relation, but not any relation is a table. Now, this one is a table. At the same time, it's also a relation, Shabab. How can I make this one only a table, but not a relation? If you make a duplicate row, let's take this row, copy, and paste it again. Now, do I have a duplicate row? Yes. Once you have a duplicate row, this is no more a relation. Now, for relation, duplicate row مش مسموح. So the difference between a relation and a table is, in a relation, duplicate rows are not allowed. But in a table, I can have duplicate rows, no problem, it's allowed. As far as there are no constraints. طبعا ما في constraints هنا. ما في unique constraint هنا طبعا. ما في ولا constraint هنا ولا constraint هنا ولا constraint هنا. معناته unique constraint. So in that case, I can make this one, I can duplicate this one many times. A table? Yes. Is this a table? Yes. Is this a table? Yes. But is it a relation? Not anymore. Why? Because I have all these are duplicate tables. Sorry, duplicate rows. Yani. So the difference between a row, a table and a relation is a relation has no duplicate rows, but in a table, duplicate rows are allowed. So this is the only difference between the two of them. At this point, clear, Shabab?
So every relation is a table.
Sorry?
Every relation is a table. But
Every
not every table is a relation.
Excellent, excellent. Every relation is a table, but not every table is a relation. When, especially if you have duplicate. For example, if I remove all of this now, is this a table? Yes, well, no, Shabab?
Yes.
Yes. Is it a relation also up to this point?
Yes.
Yes. Because I have no duplicate rows. What about this one? This is Salahuddin again. This is A. And this is 2. Are they duplicates here? Wala? They are not duplicates.
No.
Are they duplicate rows? They are not duplicate rows.
No.
They are not duplicate rows. I'm talking about rows. معناته إيش? This column is equal to this column. This column is equal to this column. This column must be equal to this column. So all the columns must be equal to each other to be duplicate row. But if there is, this column is not the same as this column, خلاص, this row and this row are not duplicate. So I'm talking about duplicate rows. So if all the columns of 2 rows are exactly the same value, then you have a duplicate rows. So in this case, it's a table, no more a relation. So this is the difference between a table and what? And a relation. Now, when do we use a relation? Most of the time we use a relation when we do research, يا شباب. تقريبا طلاب الماجستير والدكتوراه they use research. When they do research, they use what? They use relation دائما يعني. But in this course, we will be using ايش? A table.
يعني we could have duplicates يعني.
We can have duplicates unless we put constraint. لو خطيت constraint هنا طبعا قلت ايش؟ قلت this column is what? Is unique, isn't it?
بس كده صارت relation ولا؟
الحين صارت relation وتيبل على طول، لانه هنا مش هيسمح لك ان ايش؟ انك تعمل duplicates. فautomatically every row will be what? Will be separate, will be different, isn't it? In this case, I will have a relation and at the same time a table. But in this course, let's assume that we will always deal with tables, يعني, okay? Because every relation is a table anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So now,
Doctor.
yes, sir.
I have a question. When I make, like, let's say the SSN is the primary key, is it by default unique or I should make it unique?
no need to say unique after that one. خلاص لو قلت SSN is a primary لو قلت هذا primary key هو فهمت علي automatically it means two constraints. automatically حيكون موجود عندك no duplicates automatically not null. These two will be automatically. So لما تقول this is my primary key لو قلت هذا primary key حقتي معناته ايش؟ not null automatically موجود ما يحتاج تقول not null. also unique موجود ما يحتاج تقول unique. خلاص automatically لما تقول هذا primary key معروف خلاص معناته not null and unique. So all you have to do is tell Mr. DBMS that this is primary key. SSN is. Can you see my create table statement يا شباب?
We can see it.
Yes. So when I say primary SSN is a primary key, it means two things. It means كأنك هنا سويت حاجة اسمها ايش؟ not null. It's already كاتب not null. المفروض حتى ما يحتاج يكتبوا. There is no need for to write say not null because I said primary key. خلاص automatically it is not null. Comma unique. So I should say not null. Also what? Also comma what? Comma unique. So that's what primary key means. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
Doctor.
Yes, sir.
So if we don't have a constraints on our relation.
Yes, you can make many duplicates. No
And
problem.
my table have a redundancy. Can I call it a relation?
No. If you don't have any, what they call now to call it a
Have any
relation.
primary key, I don't have any constraint.
You don't have any constraint. Whatever you create, if you don't have any duplicates, it will be a relation at the same time, a table. But as soon as you put a row which is duplicate, خلاص, you don't have a relation anymore.
Okay.
Okay. But في الكورس هذا يا شباب, I prefer طبعا when you do master and PhD, you always deal with relations. You don't deal with tables, so you will never have duplicates طبعا. But in this course, we will have duplicate rows sometimes and so on. So we will call this one a row. We will call this one a column. هذه مصطلحات table here. But when I say when we say this is a relation, we will say this is a tuple and this is an attribute. Is that okay, Shaba? Is that point clear?
I think, Doctor, attributes and tuples are program language friendly, right?
They are research language. You are right. They are research language. Okay.
Because attributes and tuples are in programming.
When you maybe when you are programming, you are going to create tables and so on. Because this is like a so in programs normally when you do normal programs in database we use tables all the time. So we don't like to talk about relations whatsoever. Okay. Yeah. But they mean the same تقريبا. But the only difference زي ما كلمتكم إنه هناك duplicate ما مسموح هناك مسموح. That's the only difference أنا الحين مرات I do a mistake and I say relation and table I use them interchangeably which I should not do Okay, but I do that by mistake sometimes. Sometimes I call this one attribute instead of calling it a column because it's a table, not a relation anymore that I'm using. So from now onwards, in fact, anything that we are going to do, it's going to be a table. So the table can have duplicates or it cannot have duplicates. That's fine. It's still a table. Am I making sense to you?
Clear.
Okay, I will stop here because it's time. So if you have any questions, we can also do them inshallah next week. But let me just stop the recording because I keep forgetting sometimes about the recording and it records for a longer time for no reason.
Doctor, the lab